IA in 2009. As Director and CEO of Air Headquarters at Black Sector, he has conducted disaster relief operations. He was awarded for Best Operations in Command. Group Captain Vinay has coordinated air operations at frontline force at the Siachen Glacier and conducted joint operations with the Army during Chinese aggression in Jumar sector of Ladakh. Vinay is passionate about and has written a thesis on Kautilya's Arthashastra, submitted to the faculty of School of Advanced Air and Space Studies, Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama. He is married to Savita and has a daughter. Vinay is an active swimmer, occasional golfer, and has a keen interest in horse riding. It gives me great pleasure that Vinay Vittal happens to be my cousin's husband. He is also a gym friend of today in Samir Kashyap, and also a friend of Srinivas Bharadwaj. With an assurance that next time you would share your experiences with the Indian Air Force. I welcome you to Rotary, Group Captain Vinay Vittal.
I welcome Innovative President Mr. Gauri Gokul. Captain, stage is yours.
I express my gratitude to the President Rotary Mysuru, Mr. Subramanya Rao, Secretary, Mr. Praveen, Convener of Prajna Pravaha, Mr. Hanumanthachar Joshi. I must make a special mention of Mr. Samir Kashyap, who was instrumental in coordinating this talk. And I thank Mr. Arun Belwadi for his kind and generous words. We have a wonderful weather at Mysore. It's like a salubrious weather. Salubrious, it's giving us more and more, probably, years to live. While the north is reeling under pollution and severe cold. So we are very blessed to be on this land. There are a lot of people, some people online, some people present here who are attending this talk. So I welcome you all and send you my greetings. In Kannada, I'd say Namaskara. Ellargu Namaskara. ನಾನು ಚಿಕ್ಕವನಿರಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಹಾರ್ಡ್ಲಿ ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡರ್ಡ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಪೇರೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಡೆಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಹೊರಟೋದ್ವಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಫರ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ ನನ್ನ ಕನ್ನಡ ನಾಲೆಜ್ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದು ಲಿಮಿಟೇಷನ್ಸ್ ನನಗೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಮಾತಾಡಬಹುದು, ಬಟ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲೂ ಮಾತಾಡಕ್ಕೆ. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಪ್ರೌಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಮೈ ಮದರ್ ಟಂಗ್, ಕನ್ನಡ ಲ್ಯಾಂಗ್ವೇಜ್. Okay, now today we'll start the talk, and primarily the topic is power and strategy in Kautilya's Arthashastra. The first question which comes to our mind is, why should we study Arthashastra? Everybody is seated here. Some people are online, spending their valuable time in this evening. So why should you study Arthashastra? Please. Okay, why? Next slide. If you see generally how the world operates, how countries operate, how kingdoms operate, you'll find that it is like a pendulum, known as the pendulum theory. That means you will often find that there is a decline, then there will be some stabilization, and further progress. So this cycle continues. Whether you look at companies, big companies like the Tatas, you'll find in the 80s they had a dip. Again, they were consolidated in the 90s, and now you can see where they are. One of the leading companies in the world. Similarly, you can see Great Britain, once upon a time, having numerous colonies. But today, I'm proud to say that we have overtaken them as far as the economy goes. We are the 5th largest economy in the world. So you will definitely find that this happens also to human beings, to companies, to nations. So if this happens, that means if there is a possibility of a decline, then what should we do about it? Can we draw some lessons from our rich legacy, rich culture which we have from our epics, which was written centuries ago? Let us look at that. Okay, now why does decline happen? Decline happens because of calamities. Calamities which can be created by the failed policies of the state. If we look at certain nations today, you will find that this is absolutely true. Shall we look at Pakistan today? Because of their policies over so many decades, you can see that they are in a crisis today. Economic crisis, whatnot. The foreign reserves are absolutely low, and they're looking at people helping them. Why has this happened? This has happened because of the failed policies of the state. Similarly, you can have divine interventions. What are divine interventions? To make it very simple, it can be a pandemic. We just underwent a pandemic, COVID, last 2 years, badly hit. So many nations were affected, so many companies were affected, so many human beings were affected. This can affect the progress and put you in a decline. And also, if you have an armed rebellion against the state, some kind of insurgency, then also you'll find that there would be a decline. Okay, this slide is to demonstrate my command of English language. So don't be taken back by the words which you see on the screen. It says that it provides an insight into the ancient Indian anthology of political wisdom, theory and art of statecraft. And also it's one of the major political and strategic treatises that constitute a collection of timeless concepts. But to put it in a very simple manner, next one please. It is nothing but just this couple of lines which you see on the screen. It provides guidance to a king to rule well. You must understand the concept and the context. Most important thing here is the context. So Arthashastra presumably was written 2500 years ago during the time of Maurya dynasty. So at that time we had kingdoms, and what it does is it provides a guidance to the king to rule well. How does it do that? Next, please. Okay, in Arthashastra, what we find, just to give a glimpse of Arthashastra before we delve into the more important parts, it has three main parts, which is administration, which provides order and collection of revenue, law and justice, and foreign policy. To sum it up, it has everything that a kingdom needs or a nation needs to function. Governance, law, justice, defense, war, and foreign policy. So what are the objectives which flow from Arthashastra? Good governance, which includes promotion of welfare of the subjects. Artha primarily means material well-being of human beings. So good governance leads to promotion of welfare of subject, which leads to good economy. And good economy would lead to growth. So if you have a good economy, you will obviously generate wealth. And this wealth will allow you for growth. And in earlier terms, what it means is expansion of territory. Why expansion of territory? We'll come to that later. What are the duties of a king? The duties of the king was Raksha, Palana, Yoga, Kshema, Labha. What does it mean? Raksha means he has to provide protection to the kingdom as well as the people in the kingdom. Palana is he has to maintain law and order within the kingdom. Internal security, so external security, now followed by internal security. And safeguard the welfare of people, that is Yogakshema. Finally, you see that it boils down to Yogakshema for the people. This is the central theme of Arthashastra. So since we are talking about power, let's look at what power is precisely. Kautilya, in his thought, what we discover is he defines power as possession of strength. And he relates this by saying that success is obtaining happiness. So here I find entirely different definition in which you have a linking of power to happiness. That means happiness of a state and happiness of the people, which goes along with power. This I quote from, okay, I'll come to how many chapters are there, how many books are there subsequently. So below what you can see in bracket relates to from where I have quoted this. What Kautilya says is, in the happiness of his subjects lies the king's happiness, in their welfare, his welfare. He shall not consider as good that what pleases him, but treat as beneficial to him whatever pleases his subjects. So if you come to this, the premise here, what he wants to emphasize is that whatever pleases the people should be the focus of the king. It should not be his individual requirements. It should be what the people require. And he further elaborates that in case a king impoverishes his own people by unjust exactions, then he will lose their loyalty. For example, he says that taxation should be such, like for example, if you have a tree and you have fruits, you must only pluck the ripe fruits from the tree. You should not pluck all the fruits from the tree. You must leave some of the fruits in the tree. So this has a philosophy which has got a lot of meaning in it. So similarly, when you collect revenue or tax from people, it should be in such a manner that it would benefit the kingdom, but at the same time, it should not harm that person. You should ensure the well-being of that person. So you would find that finally it boils down to the people or population of the kingdom. Loka Samgraha, you see, happiness of the people. So it is related to happiness of the people. The definition of Artha, what is listed in the book is that material well-being of individuals. So let's look at the genesis of Arthashastra before we move further. It is quite intriguing to know that the origins of Arthashastra are shrouded in mystery. Why? Because it was lost sometime after the Gupta dynasty. And it was discovered, or it reappeared in 1904 after almost 1400 years of obscurity. Where was it located? Can anybody tell us? Mysuru. Very happy to know that from our place it was discovered. Mysuru.
Oriental Research Institute.
Precisely, Oriental Research Institute. The copy is still there in Oriental Research Institute. The manuscripts are there. I would advise all of you to take your families. Please go there and have a look at the manuscripts. Palm leaves, it's all palm leaves. And it was given to Mr. Shama Shastri, who is from Mysore. And I happened to meet his grandson, who's in NIE, Head of Department Industrial Engineering. And it was published by Shama Shastri, as I covered. First translation was carried out in 1915. This was English translation. And followed by German, Russian, and other translations. So ORI is listed here where it was found. So, sir, did you check the slide and give the answer? I know, I'm joking. Okay, and a little bit about Kautilya. Kautilya is often referred to as Chanakya also, and generally understood to be the same person as Vishnu Gupta, is also known as Vishnu Gupta. Kautil Gotra, so call him Kautilya. Chanak, son of Chanak, so Chanakya, and all these things are listed. So, how do we know that he has written this book? A lot of research has gone into it, and finally, we have concluded. A lot of scholars have done research, and even in Arthashastra, there is a criticism of earlier teachers. Criticism in the sense that it forms a dialectic form of argument. That means you would have argument which is moving in one direction, and finally Kautilya's opinion moving in another direction. So this is what was followed. If we look at Kautilya, you can see that where was he? You can see it was 350 to 283 BC, almost 2,500 years ago. And the Maurya kingdom extended from present day India almost to Pakistan to Afghanistan and Bangladesh and further. As you can see, this was what existed as one single kingdom at that time, the Maurya dynasty. And Kautilya is credited for that. Now we come to what is Arthashastra and what do we find if we look at Arthashastra. Arthashastra has 15 adhikarnas or books in which you have 150 chapters, 180 prakarnas. What are prakarnas? These are sections devoted to a particular topic. 6,000 verses is quoted in Arthashastra. However, to be more precise, there are 5,280 verses. It is in the form of prose, sutra maxim form with 380 shlokas. Pardon me. Now each book will see what exactly is there so that you can find your interest in that particular book and probably you can have a look at the book as well. So book 1 has the king and the training of the king. Now this part is very interesting because in this book 1, what I find really interesting is how the king or the prince as he grows is trained. Kautilya lays emphasis to knowledge, education. He talks about education as far as Vedas are concerned, Trai. Apart from that, he also talks about Itihasa. He talks about philosophy, Anvikshiki. Lot of emphasis on that. You find all the sciences being covered in the education for the prince. He is also to learn on the job as far as OJT, what we call on the job training, about administration, defense, foreign policy, and acquire all this education while he's growing up. Apart from gaining knowledge in the use of weapons. And Kautilya lays a lot of importance on dharma. And when he talks about education of a king, he talks about the control of senses. He talks about 6 senses. I have not listed because there's a paucity of time, I can't go deep into that. But these 6 senses actually land most of the people in trouble, even today. If you follow his dictum and ensure that you control your senses as far as these 6 senses are concerned, I'm very sure that people will do very well in life. If you look at the downfall of many great companies, many chairmen and managing directors, even today, you find that one of the reasons exists there. One of the 6 senses which he talks about. So ethics also forms an important part in this. What I find most interesting is, when you have a king, he has absolute power. How do you control a king? Is it possible to control a king? I feel that he has found a kind of, string which is invisible. What is this string? It is a string of dharma, in which he talks about what happens to a king if he does not follow his Raj Dharma. So you find that there is something else apart from a human being which is actually controlling the king in a different form. We have intelligent quotient, we have emotional quotient, we have spiritual quotient as well. So this is at the highest level. If you go into the spiritual quotient and look at dharma and see how it manifests and the education given to the king, it actually binds a king to follow a righteous path and look at the benefits that he can provide to the people of his kingdom, rather than be selfish or look at his own requirements or be a tyrant. You would find it very, very interesting that there are duties absolutely listed for the various officers of the state also, and for agriculture, mining, leisure activities, trade, and so on and so forth. Book 3 gives you a wonderful depiction of how a law and justice should exist in a country. In fact, what I found interesting here was if a judge gives a ruling and later on it is found that the ruling was wrong, incorrect, it was inaccurate, even the judge is penalized. And the penalty is probably 3 times more than what was actually there. So there is a control over the judge as well. In the code of law, validity of contracts are mentioned. If there is distress or apat, we call it apat dharma, validity of contracts lose in case you have a contract which is been signed at that time or agreement come to. So during apat, so apat dharma provides for this, for the validity to be, nullified. It's so interesting. Book 4, here you find that, detection and suppression of crime. It is proactive. It's not that a crime has happened and now we're running behind to, find the solution as to how to control or how to get the perpetuator. The king has a mechanism of covert spies and all, who keep roaming around in the kingdom, provide intelligence and inputs, and he can take decisions to ensure that they are proactive and detect and ensure that crimes are suppressed. Book 5 has different collection of topics. In case of demise of a monarch, that is the king, what can be done? Okay, from book 6 to book 13 comes the most important part. It talks about war, defense, and foreign policy. So if you look at this, actually war is also part of foreign policy. So it is really interesting to note here that is devoted from chapters book 6 to book 13 on foreign policy. That means how kingdoms interact with each other. What we call today as international relations. How nations interact with each other. This forms very important because the survival of a kingdom or the survival of a nation depends upon the foreign policy. The prosperity of the kingdom or the nation even today depends upon the foreign policy. Book 7 provides mandala theory of circle of kingdoms. This is also known as the Raj Mandala. And Arthashastra is known for this Raj Mandala, for this theory. And it provides Shadgunya, 6 methods of foreign policy. Finally, what we understand here is the ultimate goal is set for the ruler, which is the expansion of the kingdom to ensure well-being of the kingdom. Well-being of the kingdom means well-being of the people. Book 8 is interesting because it covers the calamities. Calamities for the kings, for the state or the kingdom, and there are different constituents of a kingdom, or even today it's relevant, constituents or the elements which exist in a nation. So how do we find that if there are certain deficiencies existing, how to overcome? When we talk about power, we'll come to this. Book 9 is about preparation for war, because if you want peace, you have to be prepared for war. If you're not prepared for war, there cannot be any peace. Kautilya is very clear on this. He says that if you have an option of peace and war, and if the benefits are similar, he says please opt for peace. A lot of people think that Kautilya is unscrupulous and immoral, and he says that we should go to war, or he's totally a realist. No. He asks you to make an intellectual judgment. What are the benefits which you acquire if you go to war? What are the losses which you're going to have? And similarly, how do you see that the fruits of your labor are given to the people? That is possible when you have peace. Now he moves on to fighting an enemy and other details which actually existed during the times of, 2500 years ago during Maurya dynasty and in that context. But these things can be applied even today for some formations, for the army, or even for Air Force and Navy as well. If you move to a higher level and understand what are the concepts here. This is interesting. Vijayakishu is considered as a conqueror. If you are a nation, Vijayakishu, you could be Vijayakishu. You could aspire to conquer other nations around you or kingdoms around you. Because during those times, the conditions which existed was there were small kingdoms, apart from Nanda dynasty which existed, and Alexander was about to invade India, or what we call today India. He was about to invade. So Kautilya wanted to ensure that the so-called nation or country or state or kingdoms are united. So he gives us many options as to how a weak king when threatened by a stronger king should frustrate the design of the latter and overcome. Similarly, if there is a fortified capital, how to overcome it. And book 14 gives about some secret remedies and occult practices. And finally, book 15 talks about 32 tantra yuktis or methods of treating a subject. Actually, if you look at this, it precisely defines most of the things which you find in English grammar and all those things 2500 years back. It is very, very accurate. He talks about how to define, how do you define an argument? How do you conclude? Each thing is given in a very scientific and systematic way. You can actually write a book on book 15 itself by doing the research on that. And this would be about treatment of a language. Okay, now you have some definitions and how people spoke about Arthashastra. Roger Bosch from US says that Kautilya is the first great political realist of the world. Realist, primarily when we look at realist, if all the people don't understand for the benefit of some, we have what is known as realism in international relations and liberalism at the further end, two extremities. Okay, realism, what we are looking at is, in a layman's definition, if I may say so, that you would find that realist thinks that the world is always at war. We are always at war. So if you look at centuries, let's start moving from 2500 years and start moving till now. Or even from 1947 till now. There have been so many wars. So that means there are wars always going on. Even now there's a war, Russia, Ukraine. But there are intervals of peace. Reality is war. People want to survive. So they are selfish. This is the theory behind it. Liberalists say no, people are good. People want peace. Wars are an aberration. So two extremities. So here he was called as the first great political realist of the world. However, I would differ with this because when you do a deeper research in Arthashastra, you find that Kautilya has shades of realism, shades of liberalism as well, shades of humanism and idealism as well. He's a humanist when he talks about welfare of the people, which is the center theme. And when he talks about treating a defeated king well, what does it mean? It's an idealist. So, though he does not say that there is a possibility of a utopian world to exist, he is a realist when it comes to survival, when it is required, but he is a liberalist when it comes to domestic politics or safeguarding the interests of the people. Okay, this has been considered as one of the great political and strategic treatises of the ancient world. He's been compared to Niccolo Machiavelli. You might have heard about this the prince. So, in fact, Dr. Upender Singh, who is a professor in Delhi University, has written a book. And she says that it is unfair to call Kautilya as the Indian Machiavelli. It should be the other way around. Machiavelli should be known as the Kautilya of Italy. That's what she says. She's the daughter of Dr. Manmohan Singh. Further elaboration on the same. Okay, you can see that it has been treated as a triangle polity, science of politics. I define Arthashastra as an art and science of governance, diplomacy, and war. Why? Because there are tangibles and intangibles as well. If it is precise, it is a science. If it is, having uncertainties, if it has a scope for you to interpret as well as understand, and if it provides you with a guidance and provides you with principles, it would be an art. So that's why I call it an art and science of. Now we look at national interest. Why? Because we're talking about power and strategy. Why do we need power? Why do we need a strategy? Because nations are interested in their own interests. What are the interests that the nations have? Nations work for their own interests. All nations do. Prestige, wealth, and security. All nations want prestige, status in the world order. Even today, wealth, obviously, because economically all nations want to do well, they aspire to do well. That's what provides you with power as well. And security. Without security, nation cannot function. You cannot have a good economy without security, and without a good economy, you can't have a good security. And if you see and read the ancient texts, you'd find like Thucydides' Peloponnesian War, same thing is also talked about in the sense of fear, honor, and interest. You might have heard fear, honor, interest. Fear relates to security, honor, prestige, interest, wealth. In fact, for us also it is the same. All of us aspire to have prestige, wealth, and security in our lives. If you just take a look at the Kautilyan state, you can see this is also known as the Saptanga. We call it as Saptanga. Prakritis, 7 elements or constituents which I talked about earlier. These are, when we talk about the kingdom, you have the ruler, also known as Swami, ministers, Amatya, urban and rural population with territory, Janapada, fortifications, Durga, economic base, Kosha, military and martial capacity, Danda, ally, Mitra. So the last one where we see is the external element, and other elements are internal. If we consider the same thing in the present day lexicon, we can also say that the Swami can be related to the leadership of the nation. So if we want to talk about the power of a nation today, since we're talking about the power, so the most important is the leadership. Like for instance, in India, the Prime Minister, what kind of leadership do we have? In which the Arthashastra lists 3 qualities in a leader, any leader or a king: Utsaha Shakti, enthusiasm, courage, energetic, morale, Prabhava Shakti, which is physical. What kind of military does the nation have? Economy, which are the physical attributes of a nation. So you find that you have this Prabhava Shakti, Utsaha Shakti, and Mantra Shakti. What is Mantra Shakti? Mantra Shakti is the use of intellectual. That means the intellectual capability to make a judgment in which direction the nation should head, or economic progress, or you got to go to war for your survival. All the decisions regarding this. So you find that the leadership gives the direction to the nation. The most important element of a nation, even valid today. Then you have the governing body, as we might call cabinet of ministers and other people who can help govern the nation, Amatya, which can provide the command, control, and which is actually communications to run the nation. Or if you say, if we look at a company also, all this would be applicable. When we talk about a leader and people who help him, the employees. Then we come to next, which is the Janapada or the Rashtra, in which the population with the territory, the most important element, it provides a social and cultural element. The support of the population is very, very essential for the leader of the country, for his strategy. Economy, needless to say, the resources and wealth of a nation would provide the strength a nation would have. Infrastructure, which we can say now as the technology and information, or in earlier terms they called it as the Durga, as it was applicable in the context of a kingdom 2500 years ago, that was primarily to provide infrastructure for defense from external threats. Thereafter, we see the military taking predominance here. That military, which is known as the Bala or Danda, provides the power to the nation as well. And this is very important because this provides the security. And today's lexicon, if you see, you have ground, that you have army, sea, the navy, air, the air force, from where I come from, space, which is very, very important nowadays because the future wars are going to be fought through space, from space, probably in space as well. And the weaponization is already taking place. Though there are treaties existing that we should not weaponize this space, but it's a accepted fact. And cyber, everybody knows about cyber threats. There have been many occasions. Estonia has been hit very badly. When Iran was hit badly, the nuclear turbines were affected by using cyber. And the devastation can be caused using cyber. So all these elements, you need to have security. And finally, the external element, allies, diplomacy. Very, very important. If we just look at it from a perspective, when we give an example and talk about it, it will make more sense. For instance, let's say 1971 war. What happened? In 1971 war, how did we ensure that we were all powerful? And what was the strategy which we had? Our leadership was very strong at that time. Prime Minister was very strong to take bold decisions. She had already taken a bold decision as far as the atomic is concerned. And this was the second bold decision which she took because we had an influx of a lot of people from East Pakistan at that point. And there were people to support her decisions. They were able people who supported her. Here, when we look at the people, there was a large influx of people from across, and it was also hampering the people from our nation at that point of time. It would affect us obviously economically as well. And our infrastructure would crumble in such kind of a situation in a crisis. So obviously she approached the military. Sam Manekshaw was the general at that point of time. She approached it. In fact, way in the beginning of the year 1971, to take action so as to negate this threat. But what we did was we prepared for the aggression subsequently and took our time. We had a strategy in place and went through and finally ensured our aim was achieved. And today you have what we call as Bangladesh, a new nation which was born. And India, you'd be surprised to know, there's a book written by Michael Walzer. And the name of the book is Just Wars. Just. And called fair and just wars. So he says the only war in the world or the intervention which is certified as just is this intervention by India in 1971. It's commended. It's because we went in and we came out instantly and left the people to grow as Bangladesh. Diplomacy, she ensured that everybody was known, everybody knew as what was happening and everybody would know what is going to happen. She aspired for support from US, which we did not get, and from Europe, which we did not get. There was a treaty, friendship treaty signed with Russia. In fact, it saved us because eventually in December, we had the aircraft carrier sailing into the Indian Ocean from the US. Even UK also sent their ships. Russia sent a ship behind, and it was Russia which saved us in 1971. So we did not have these nations actually coming into the war. It was left to us and Pakistan only. So the diplomacy was what was very, very critical at that point of time. She also managed to keep China out. Because the planning was such that it was carried out in winters. So you find how the power is generated and how the strategies are created. The elements of a nation, which was known as the elements or constituents of a state, and which was listed by Arthashastra, by Kautilya in Arthashastra, is applicable today. And I've given you an example. What it was called as this, what you see slightly here in Nietzsche is actually covering it. It is known as comprehensive national power. All this add up to the national power of a country. Next one. This is how I look at it. What is most critical? The political leadership. It provides the prestige or symbolizes the prestige, economy, wealth, and military, which provides the security. So, prestige, wealth, and security, but everything has to be oriented towards the population of the state. So, the critical element in Arthashastra, the central element is the people of the kingdom. In fact, he says in one of the shlokas that what is a country without the people? If you have some place, but if you do not have people, what is the significance of that place? So similarly, here you can see that the central theme is population, which is applicable. So everything has to be oriented towards the people of the nation. If you look at strategy, now we'll go a little bit into the strategy. First, we'd like to see what is strategy. Strategy is a term which has come from the military. 1940s, it was brought into other domains as well. Even management nowadays uses the term of strategy. So if you look at it, there are different levels. Let's say tactical level, strategic level. So look at this tactical level, we'll see victory. So strategy is for victory. But are we looking for victory or beyond? That is, can we say that World War I was a victory for the Allies? If you say that, then why did World War II occur? Why did we have two power blocks after the Second World War? US and Russia, Soviet. Was that what was the need of the army? So if you actually look in hindsight, you might differ with the definition of victory or success. Candidacy strategy is looking into the future and having a situation of continuing advantage. Is that what we want? Probably yes. So when we talk about a nation, we talk about a foreign policy. So that will ensure that we attain progress. Our aim is to move from decline to civilization to progress. That is the bottom line. Or if we are moving into the reverse direction, then arrest that and move into progress. So what do we do for that? When Kautilya talks about the foreign policy, he talks about diplomatically outmaneuvering his enemy. Mantra, yuddha. So first, he does not talk about war. He talks about diplomacy. That means you must avoid war. There is no requirement to go to war straight away. If your survival is at stake, if you want to prosper, how you will do that? Nevertheless, first thing is mantra yuddha, which is diplomacy by council, to ensure that the enemy is either isolated or reduced in power capability. And when conditions are suitable, then necessary action will be taken. So if you look at Pakistan today, in fact, shall we say that our policy has worked to some extent? Have we managed to isolate it? Has it moved into a crisis of some order? Are we really sure that we did that? or the failed policies of the state of Pakistan did that?
Maybe both.
Okay, maybe both. Let's see. So, what are the guiding principles of foreign policy enumerated by Kautilya? This is enhance the capability of the kingdom. That is, enhance your power. How will you do that? We just covered the constituent elements of the state. So that is how you can enhance your power. That means you can augment your resources and power. And if you intend to go on a campaign or conquest, so in those times, how you could acquire resources and gain in power and wealth was by going on a conquest. Otherwise, your enemy could do the same to you. So enemy can be eliminated or neutralized. So there needs to be an intellectual discretion or prudence in policy choices to ensure stable growth and peace. So that's where the political leadership comes into the being. That's the importance of intellectual judgment. He always advises a leader that peace is preferable to war as long as outcome is equivalent. And also, king's behavior in victory and defeat must be just. Those who help are allies and those who hinder are enemies. So, to give you an example here, there is a play, Rudra Rakshasa. Mudra Rakshasa. Yeah. So, if you have acquired some knowledge about that, in that you find that after defeating an enemy king, Kautilya makes the king ensure that the enemy minister, who was the advisor to that king who has been defeated, is still retained, because that minister was very capable. So even after defeating a kingdom, his actions actually advises a king to be just. And there's a scientific reason behind it. This is the Raj Mandala, and this is what Arthashastra is very famous for. This looks complex, but actually it is not complex. So I'll simplify it for you. We talked about the Vijikishu. Vijikishu is a person with aspiration for conquering other kingdoms or becoming a Chakravarti by taking over. Let's say, talking about today's scenario, taking over companies probably, or having mergers or alliances. So in that lexicon. So here you find Vijikishu is shown in the center in blue, known as the conqueror. You could be the Vijikishu, or somebody else can be the Vijikishu. This is geopolitical, but it is flexible. So your neighbor kingdom, in that case, when we had the situation as existed 2500 years ago, Ari Mitra. So prior to that, you see Ari. Ari is a kingdom who has his borders, contiguous to yours. Why does he become an enemy? Because you want to expand for your prosperity. So does he. He also wants to progress, acquire wealth, prosper. So that is why he becomes a threat to you. Once he is a threat to you, he could be an enemy. In this, you will find that there is one enemy in the below and one above. Now he is known as Ari Mitra. Why is he known as Ari Mitra? Because he is an enemy to us. Let's say we are Vijikishu in this case. So the one below is our enemy. The one above also will become an enemy because his borders are contiguous to ours. But since our interests are in conflict and his interests are in sync with the other neighbor below, they would be friends. Similarly, you have Mitra, who will be our ally, because similarly the enemy has the same dilemma with his neighbor. Neighbor wants to again expand, so he becomes an enemy to our enemy. So enemy's enemy is our friend. Everybody's heard this. Enemy's enemy is our friend. Similarly, you move up, you find the same. So we'll restrict ourselves to conqueror, enemy, enemy's ally, Mitra, that means our ally, and one more on the top. Okay. So So move to the left, you have Madhyama. Madhyama is one who has his borders, which is continuous to both of us, that means us as well as our enemy. And Udasina is little far away, but he is more powerful. Madhyama is powerful than either, and Udasina is most powerful. This is not sacrosanct as given by Kautilya. It can be flexible. You may not have Udasina and Madhyama also. You could have only enemies and friends. So it is flexible in this. So he gives what all is required to be done in those cases. So let's see, if you look at it, do you find it convincing? Let's see. We are India. We have Pakistan with the border. Are we friendly to Pakistan? Pakistan perceives a threat from us. We perceive a threat from Pakistan. Let's move to China. Similarly, you'll find most of the nations, you'll find Germany, France. You'll find that conflicts. So you'll find that this actually is applicable. If we look at the Indian scenario, you can say, okay, Pakistan is our enemy. Madhyama could be China also. Because borders are contiguous, is more powerful than either. And you could have Russia as Udasina probably, or even US as Udasina. Geopolitical, geography as well as political. Okay. Next slide, please. So, what is the aim of the conqueror or Vijayavishu? So, primarily to expand his own kingdom, that would be the conqueror's territory, primarily to grow in power. Next. Okay. Finally, what it intends to tell us is the king has to see what kind of enemies does he have, and subsequently what are the actions that need to be taken to keep the kingdom safe, and how to go about it. So this gives a kind of a model for him to understand and think about the situation in terms of other nations or kingdoms. So in this also he says friends are not permanent, enemies are also not permanent. It could move from being, you can have friends as well as enemies. So Shadbunyas are 6 foreign policy approaches, which is the Samdhi, peace, Vigraha, war, Asana, neutrality, Dhyana, war preparation, coercive diplomacy, Samshaya, alliance building, Vedbhav, peace with one another. Here, if you look at it, let's talk about Israel as such. Israel was given birth to in hostile amongst the Arab nations in a hostile region. If you see, they have been at war 1948, 56, 67, 73, 85, continuously. They also maintained neutrality to grow in power. They had preparation for war, coercive diplomacy, and they also had peace with many countries and to be hostile to others like US, UK, France. They acquired weapons from their support and then carried out the increase or augmentation of power. Next. So here, this is an important slide where you see that depending on the relative power, you can move from being weak, if you're weak or if you're dominant, to extremities. What all actions can you take? This helps you in formulating your strategy. If you are not dominant, then probably you will move to the left side. You would seek, some shreya or protection. As you keep growing in power, you can actually move towards being more attacking. Like for instance, let's say in a company like Tata's, let's say, as they kept growing in power and in wealth, they started acquiring companies. Almost 36 international companies have been acquired by Tata, including JLR, which we know today. How have they done that? This is the strategy which they have used. Probably next time when we have some time, we can go into deep about this. Thanks. Okay, I had these few slides which talked about management because Samir was interested in a couple of management things. So if we look at this, is a project which I want to pick up, wherein I want to see how we can relate Kautilya's Arthashastra deeply into management. So I've done some superficial, I don't take more than 3-4 minutes on this and wind up. Okay. So management. Can we look at management? Pendulum theory is applicable in management. Companies grow, companies wither and not do so well. Yes. So that means when we look at management, you find that companies form. So you have forming, then you have storming, because when a company is born, you have a lot of confusion, a lot of things which are not settled, procedures are not set. So there are a lot of clashes which happen. That is what you find storming. Then you have norming. When procedures are laid down, people get used to the work culture, they start norming. Norms are there. Eventually you have progress. Because of it, the graph moves up as far as the performance of the company is concerned. And also there is a possibility of decline. So is it similar to the pendulum theory which we saw earlier? Decline, stabilization, progress. This can happen to companies as well. The calamities could be because of the failed policies of the organization, of like pandemic, has affected many companies. The IT companies are not doing so well today. The top IT companies of India. Look at the share market, you will get an idea as to what is happening. Okay, Arthashastra can also give some guidance on this. Okay, next. When we talk about territory, you can look at market share, not only within India, beyond as well. That's what the big companies of India have been doing in Vittal. Go back. So you find that in a company, if you're benevolent towards your customers, which is the marketing philosophy, and your own employees, it leads to actually growth of the company and helps you acquire wealth, profit maximization. So motivating your employees, focusing on the customers is the key. What we find is Raksha, Palana, Yoga, Kshema. That's what it boils down. It's centered on the people as well as what was the central theme of Arthashastra. Next. So what is marketing? It's the whole business seen from customer's point of view. Business success is not determined by the producer but by the customer. Peter Drucker. Next.
ನಮಗೂ ಅಕಾಡೆಮಿಕ್ ಇಂಟ್ರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಇತ್ತು, ಎಲ್ಲ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ಕೊಂಡು ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ವು. ಟೈಮ್ಗಿಂತ ಏನೇ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಈ ರಾಜಕಾರಣದಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತಿಲ್ಲ.
Okay, Walmart says that customer service
freedom ಆಗಿದ್ರೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ, freedom ಇರಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ.
Okay, I think we'll wind up after this a few more slides like this which bring the emphasis on the customer. Okay, let's go to the last slide and one behind that, one before that. Okay, same thing when you look at others also, with the icons. Okay, in one of the leading companies of the world, their emphasis has been customers. Honda. Next. Same as Arthashastra. Okay, foreign policy we may call it, but the strategy is the same. There is a warfare which exists. Next. Okay, now what is important is how you are change is inevitable. That's what Arthashastra. Finally, I have shown you the books which exist for Arthashastra. The book on the left is written by the center one is like a novel. It's an easy read. How precise is the which is on the right most. It's 3 volumes. First volume is in Sanskrit. All the shlokas are there. Second one is the translation into English, and third one is his comment. So first one and second one are the most important books. I have finished. I am very grateful for a patient hearing. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.
Thank you. I think someday about them first, and then we'll see any objections from your people for 1 week, on each time, and then if there's nothing, then we can start getting them to our meetings. So I would like to call upon Dr. Arthashastra with this office Wednesday.
Hi, good to see a full house. Looks like last week's meeting actually brought in change. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Shashikaran KB. He has done his MBBS, MD and DMB in pediatrics, and he's also done his DM in nephrology. He's currently working as assistant professor and head of nephrology, Institute of Nephrourology at Mysore. His spouse is Dr. Shilpa M. Vijay, who's a gynecologist, and she works at Mysore Medical College and Kangaroo Care. They have 2 children. Adya is 6 years old and Shriyan is 1 year old. What he says is that most of his time is spent entertaining his kids. He plays a bit of badminton, loves reading novels, and has switched to audible books now. He aspires to roam around the world one day. The second person I'd like to introduce is Dr. Pawan V. Joshi. He's done his MBBS and MS in ophthalmology. So he's a senior eye specialist and phaco-refractive surgeon. He works at ASG Eye Hospital, Mysore. Spouse is Dr. Anupama Pandey, who is a MD in pediatrics. So she's a neonatologist and a senior resident at GSS Medical College. They have 2 children. Gaurika is 6 years old and Lamika is 1 year. His interests include meeting new people. He loves music, sports, current affairs, and he likes solving a lot of social issues. His aspiration is to create a healthcare model for ophthalmology in which all sections of the society get the highest standard of care. Thank you.
Those 2 we have one more. This is proposed by Vinay Das. That's not here. So his name is Raghavendra Urpan. He is a senior delivery manager at Infosys, and also trustee of CSR Mysore. And then we have 2 more proposals. The couple proposed by PDG Sponsor. So it's Mr. J. Purushottam and his wife, Srimati Namarana, both being MALB. And our next weekly meeting is on 22nd of January, Sunday. It's a men's cookout at the White Lake Resorts. So, and we are forming a team of 10 each, 5 members, and details will be sent. And as per the membership goes, I'll send out the short introduction of these 5 members along with the photo. And if we do not have any objections or as such for next week, so then I think from February we can bother the meetings.
Thank you, Praveen. Now, I request Dr. Joshi to propose the vote of thanks. Joshi, sir.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಮೊಟ್ಟಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಪ್ರೆಸಿಡೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಲಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಯೂತ್ ಡೇ ಸ್ವಾಮಿಕರಂದರ ಜಯಂತಿ ಸಹ ಅದರ ಶುಭಾಶಯಗಳನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ, it was a wonderful talk by our friend group captain Vinay, and it was really enchanting and it was very useful for us. Maybe we would have given some more time to understand it, and maybe we will expect some more in future also. Thank you for that. And before I proceed with the other one, first of all, let me give some information regarding Prajna Pravaha. So, Madhu Ankota is the Prajna Pravaha. It's an intellectual form, which is it is a nationwide intellectual movement actually in Bharatiya ethos and traditions. It was started in 1905, and after that by Sudarshan Ji, the first RSS Sanghchalak. It is not a RSS, the body, but it is a supporting one. It is mainly involved in realization of objectives of nationalism and patriotism, arousal of spirit of true intellectualism and awareness of among the working age population, improvement in national building and progressive views, and bringing the intellectuals together. This is the main objectives of Prajna Pravaha. And Prajna Pravaha is highly thankful to the Rotary Center for all their the help and as well as the encouragement and support. Thanks to our president, and as well as Praveen. And special thanks to our friend Samir Kashyap, who have been very instrumental in bringing a wonderful speaker. And thanks to all our very good Rotarian friends and as well as our friends from Prajna Pravaha and was good for traveling us. Thank you, Varun. Thank you.
I adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next time you should not